Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about how the major and minor pentatonic scales can be built out of all the major and minor modes from the major scale. First off, if you'd like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 5.23 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson, we talked about the major and minor pentatonic scales. This lesson, I'm going to relate them back to the modes of the major scale and show you how they can all be built out of each of the modes of the major scale, each of the modes except the Locrian mode. So on your screen right now is the G major scale, or G Ionian. You can build your major pentatonic scale out of this mode. You can build it out of any of the major modes. So to get to the G major pentatonic scale from G Ionian, all you do is remove the 4 and the 7, so you're going from 7 notes down to 5, and that will give you your G major pentatonic scale. Because from the last lesson you should remember that the G major pentatonic scale is built root 2, 3, 5, 6. The G Ionian is root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You just remove the 4 and the 7, you end up with G major pentatonic. Or you can do it from G Lydian. G Lydian is root 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7. You just remove the sharp 4 this time and the 7, and that will give you G major pentatonic scale. Or you can do it from G Mixolydian. G Mixolydian is root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. This time you just remove the 4 and the flat 7. That gives you G major pentatonic scale. So the nice thing about the major pentatonic scale is that you don't have any avoid notes. You know that in Ionian, the 4 is an avoid note, that it's a very distant interval. In the major pentatonic scale, that's removed. You don't have to worry about any avoid notes. Lydian doesn't have any avoid notes already, but Mixolydian, again, it's the 4. So going to major pentatonic, again, you remove that 4. You don't have any avoid notes to worry about. So that's one of the reasons the pentatonics are easier to use than the modes. You don't have avoid notes, and you don't have as many notes to worry about, as many notes to learn, which also means you have less patterns to learn. So that's how you get the major pentatonic scale from the major modes. Now we're going to do the same thing with minor. On your screen right now is the Dorian mode, G Dorian. To get to the minor pentatonic scale, you know that Dorian is root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. To get to the minor pentatonic scale, we're going to remove the 2 and the 6 to go from 7 notes down to 5. Then we're going to have the minor pentatonic scale. So this is G Dorian, this is G minor pentatonic. Or from the Phrygian mode, you know Phrygian is root flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. This time we're going to remove the flat 2 and the flat 6. That's going to give us minor pentatonic. So here's G Phrygian, here's G minor pentatonic, removing the flat 2 and the flat 6. Or your last minor mode, you know, is Aeolian. To get to the minor pentatonic from Aeolian, you remove the 2 and the flat 6. That gives you minor pentatonic. So here's G Aeolian, here's G minor pentatonic. And again, you've removed any of the avoid notes. Dorian doesn't have any avoid notes, so it doesn't really matter. Phrygian, you removed the flat 2 and the flat 6, which are both avoid notes. And Aeolian, you remove the flat 6, which is an avoid note. So again, that's a reason why the pentatonics are easier to use than the modes. So within each of the major modes lies the major pentatonic scale, and within each of the minor modes lies the minor pentatonic scale. Like I said, the only place you can't find a minor or major pentatonic scale is out of Locrian mode, and that's because Locrian has a flat 5, and the major and minor pentatonic scales have perfect fifths. So really what that means is that anytime you're playing over a major chord from the major scale keys, you can use major pentatonic Or anytime you're playing over a minor chord from the major scale keys, you can use minor pentatonic. So over any of the 1 chords from the major scale keys, you can use the major pentatonic. Over any of the 4 chords, the same. Over any of the 5 chords, the same. Over any of the 2 chords, the 3 chords, or the 6 chords from the major scale keys, you can use minor pentatonic. So when you're using the minor or major pentatonics, you don't have to think about what mode you're on, because major works over any of the major chords and minor works over any of the minor chords. So for example, if we go back to this chord progression that we've talked about a lot, which is in the key of C of 1, 6, 2, 5. So before, when I was talking about soloing with the modes, I told you had to think about C Ionian over the first chord, A Aeolian over the second, D Dorian over the third chord, and G Mixolydian over the 4th chord. Even though those are all straight out of the key of C, they all have the same notes, you needed to think about the new tonal center and the mode that you were using to do that, because each one created different notes that sounded good over different chords. For example, over the C Ionian, C sounds really good, the note of C, but over G it sounds horrible because it's the avoid note. So it's not a good resting tone over the G, but it's an extremely strong resting tone over the C. But then we can simplify that with the major and minor pentatonic scales. Instead of thinking about each of the modes over these chords, we can just think about over the major chords to use the major pentatonic with the same root, and over the minor chords use the minor pentatonic with the same root. So over C major you'd use C major pentatonic, over A minor you'd use A minor pentatonic, D minor you'd use D minor pentatonic, and G major you would use G major pentatonic. And if you do that, you're going to sound pretty strong over this chord progression when you're soloing, and you're not going to have any avoid notes to worry about. So you don't have to think about modes or anything like that. You just think about each of these pentatonic scales over those chords. And then really it's even a little simpler than it seems. Even if you're just thinking minor pentatonic, which a lot of people do because I said it's the most popular scale for most guitarists, you could think of A minor pentatonic, then just stay on A minor pentatonic, then D minor pentatonic, then E minor pentatonic. Because like I said, the relative major and minor share the exact same notes. So C major pentatonic has the exact same notes as A minor pentatonic. So that simplifies it a little bit from what it looks like, because these first 2 chords, you're just really using the notes from A minor pentatonic. You're not having to change where your fingering lands on the fretboard. You need to really think about your new tonal centers over each chord, but when you're just starting out, you can just think A minor pentatonic over those 2 chords, and then switch to D minor pentatonic, then E minor pentatonic. Again, this would be E minor pentatonic because it's relative minor of G, which is G major pentatonic, or the G major chord. So a lot of people think that way. They don't think, oh, C major pentatonic here, then A minor pentatonic. A lot just think in minor pentatonics because that's what they learned, and it's easier to visualize that way. So that's a way you can start off, and then eventually you need to start thinking about the tonal centers and the intervals, but to start off you can just simplify it like that. And that's over a diatonic chord progression. You can also use the pentatonics to simplify a chord progression that has non-diatonic chords. So this is another chord progression that we looked at, which had chords from the key of C, and then borrowed a chord from the parallel minor, which was C minor. So this A flat is actually coming out of C minor instead of the key of C. So this A flat major chord is in a different key than these other chords. So before, when I was telling you, when you're thinking about modes, you had to think about a mode from a different key over that A flat major chord when you hit it. So that was a lot to think about when you're soloing. If you're just using the pentatonic scales, all you really have to think about is C major pentatonic over this chord, the C major, F major pentatonic over the F, A flat major pentatonic over the A flat, G major pentatonic over the G. So if you're just thinking in pentatonics, you don't have to think about parent major scales or anything. You just think about, oh, this A flat, I'm just going to use A flat major pentatonic. This F major, I'm using F major pentatonic, and so on. You're not having to think about keys in the same way as far as parent major scales go. And that can make it really simple, because then if you're analyzing a song, you don't have to really figure out where this chord came from. All you're going to do is use its pentatonic scale over it, and it's going to sound pretty strong. So the pentatonic scales can be really useful to solo with and simplify things and still simplify them, but also can make them sound stronger because you're following the chords a little better than if you're just using one parent major scale. So that's how the major and minor pentatonic scales can be built out of each of the modes and how you can use them to solo. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to show you more advanced ways to use the pentatonic scales to solo, and this is really going to take your playing to the next level when you're ready for it. So it'll be really useful information for you to watch. And be sure to download the e-guide, all the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we have at least one new lesson every day.